Our next session, and let me tell you that this is where we're about to take cues on global best practices on regulation. So it's going to be another very important session that we've all been looking forward to. Regulation has been a constant topic. We've been able to understand that from an India perspective, but let's get that from a global perspective as well. And while we set the stage, let me tell you that this session has been very aptly placed just before lunch so that we get to chew some more food for thought from our next esteemed speaker who's about to join us in the next couple of minutes. In fact, our next speaker is the president of the International Association of Gaming Regulators, serving over 80 jurisdictions across 50 countries. As a director of the UK Gambling Commission, he leads the efforts to develop evidence-based policies and also produce official statistics and also oversee research initiatives supporting government advice. Recently, he's also led key projects on industry challenges, pandemic impacts, and the Gambling Act review. Again, a much-awaited session. What we're about to do is deep dive into a quick 10-minute talk by our next speaker. Post that, we'll have a quick fireside chat as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us none other than Ben Haden, President, International Association of Gaming Regulators. Can we have a huge round of applause? We're about to gather the global perspective here. So with that, Ben, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
So it's still just about morning, so good morning, everyone. And thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you indeed to the IMAAI for their invitation to come and speak to you. I'm here because I passionately believe in learning from each other's experience, and much of what I've heard over the last day and a half, I think really is central to how you develop good thinking around whether you're a regulator, an operator, or indeed a policy maker. So you've very helpfully set out what I do, but I think it's worth reflecting for me that the real benefit of being president of IAGA is that we really are a global organization, and so I'm very fortunate to be able to talk to jurisdictions which are about to regulate, jurisdictions which are newly regulating, but also jurisdictions who have been regulating for a while and are thinking once again about what their structures look like. And I think, therefore, you know, I get to see instances such as the impact of mobile in Africa, and it was interesting yesterday for me listening to what seemed to be very similar themes here in India. Whether it's around sports integrity in the US as it grapples with how it creates its industry over there against the backdrop of those sort of mega sports. But also you see things like from Australia, deep thinking around advertising and how that should be associated or not with particular sport or product. Like most industries, I think today's gaming sector landscape is, to be honest, in a real sort of state of flux. And I think it's driven by the increasing number of countries who are thinking very carefully about it from a regulatory point of view, the rapid advances in technology and shifting market and consumer trends, clearly with a splash of economic uncertainty. Now, challenges and opportunities have always been complex in this sector, but I think now, as it becomes more mainstream, you really see a public microscope that perhaps it didn't have before. And I think this is the same whether you're a regulator or an industry leader. And we both need to have a sort of commitment to openness and agility, and perhaps the capacity to be able to move quickly when we need to. Not something that's always associated with regulators, I would have to admit. And when I speak to my members about the hot topics in their jurisdiction or country, there are a few familiar threads. The right balance of regulation for consumer safety to commercial freedom. The rise of artificial intelligence and increasing use of data, and I think increasingly there as well, transparency of what is being done with people's data, and then the challenge of illegal gaming and some of those key factors which are really shaping the regulatory landscape at the moment. I do think that consumer behaviour and expectations can continue to change also, And I would say I've heard a little less about that over the last sort of day and a half. Because I think that just as the industry is trying to understand and leverage the data revolution, the consumer is thinking and demanding more about that too. And transparency, again, is a key word there. But it's what makes it such an interesting moment for me to understand better what's happening in India, where you have a government and an industry looking hard to maximize the benefits of a sector while keeping consumers safe. Now, I'm not here to say how things should be done. That's just not my job. But I am here to share experience and perspective. It's right that elected parliaments in different jurisdictions set the public policy and regulatory framework that they want for gambling. I recently spoke in Italy at a government assembly which was considering the next evolution of their gaming regulatory framework. And I think their sort of challenge was quite well set out as this. Each country has different gaming regulations, often very diverse and layered, even within the same national territory. It's of fundamental importance to understand the gaming regulations, existing limits, and the balance between different levels of governance in other countries, with the aim of understanding what can be imported into Italy and what best practices exist. So, as you can imagine, that is music to my ears. Because I think it is important for everyone to understand the international experience. The first thing that I think you see is the breadth of issues that we have to face. I think even 5 or 6 years ago, a gaming regulator could probably be confident in the knowledge that what they do would be reported in the national press, but only at page 27, and only a few lines at the bottom of a page, and probably only in the business papers. Not so much anymore. New products, new regulations, new market, new consumer fears, new integrity challenges, new tech leads to fierce debate, and I think that is something that people need to consider. There are also challenges and opportunities from what has become a very global supply chain. You don't need me to tell you how quickly ideas spread around the world, but in the gaming sector, I think it's really collided sort of full tilt with mainstream trends that in a way that perhaps didn't really happen before. So I think you have gaming companies that are trying to work out how to be mainstream entertainment brands, and you have mainstream entertainment brands trying to work out how they can incorporate gaming. So it is important to look at other sectors, I think, when you're trying to work out what is right for yourselves. So how should one import some of that experience? I think there are 3 key steps, one of which is selfish. But the first one is seeking out what seems to work elsewhere and why. In the UK, we receive a lot of visits from around the world every month from regulators who are seeking to engage and understand. But I think you then need to set the evidence in your own context. Every jurisdiction is different. It is no good trying to take a framework from one country and simply plant it in another, because I very much doubt it will work. And the third, the selfish thing from me as an IAGA president, is that those understandings that you find are fed back to others, so it becomes part of a loop. So how do you recognize best practice when you see it? Well, I think we need to be cautious over the use of the word best practice. I think as a regulator, I'm always very wary of the silver bullet answer. And I think our regulatory approach, therefore, should mirror the development of products. It should never stand still, but it should iterate, to reflect that nothing is perfect, and the world doesn't stand still, and that we also have that capacity to change if things are not working. So I think perhaps it's examples of great practice that we are looking for rather than best practice. So I just want to finish by reflecting on a few points around the question of responsible gaming, or safer gaming, as we would call it in the UK. And this really does strike to that question around the balance between player welfare and industry growth. And as regulators, we're tasked with ensuring that the gaming industry thrives in a manner which is both sustainable, and there's an interesting discussion all on its own, and socially responsible. And this involves protecting players from harm while supporting, as appropriate to the jurisdiction, the industry's growth and innovation. It's really difficult, but you can look at examples of jurisdiction around the world where safer, responsible gaming has not been at the forefront of thinking. And I think as an industry, you need to be wary of that, because where instances of concern, major concern happen, you can see governments change tack quite quickly and bring in regulation which is perhaps more severe than you would wish. So, I don't think that best practice exists, but I do see that I see lots of examples of great or interesting practice. And I think that they all share the following ingredients. First of all, they have clarity in terms of what they are trying to achieve. So in the UK, for example, we have some very clear metrics, impact metrics that we monitor and set out, say, this is what we're trying to achieve. It is then really important that you build an evidence base to support that. We need to know where we're working from, and we need to know understand the impact of what we are doing. Is it working? Evaluation is critical. There are many approaches in the safer gaming space, but I think what is more important is how they work together as a group. So understanding that consumer journey and understanding why and when you might intervene as an industry or a regulator or a policymaker is critical, because if you change something here, it may have an impact over there that you might not like. And finally, there's the importance of flexibility, as I say, of a governance framework. So you need to be able to change easily when things don't work. And as we all know, sometimes it does take policy a while to catch up. So to finish, I think dealing with our challenges needs an open, engaged mind. But how we apply it all in our own jurisdictions is up to us. Thank you very much for listening.